But if we get taken out by a volcano, so be it. The Earth is majestic and more powerful than us all. Rumors an affair with his half sister. He's a messy, 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 messy person. Whoa, they're all messy. Oh my god. The weather was unseasonably cold and stormy, perfect for taking opium and having affairs with your wife's sister. I learned so much today. I'm amped right now. Whew, so messy. Hello and welcome to another episode of whatever this is. Let's see where this goes and learning as we go. We're still workshopping the name. But this week, I wanted to look into 1816 or A Year Without a Summer. My memory was jogged because last week we were looking into Emily Bronte and Wuthering Heights, and Emily Bronte was born in 1818. And I recalled that that was a significant period of time in history, and she would have been born close to This Year Without a Summer. I had remembered that there were some other significant works of literature that came out as a result of This Year Without a Summer, and I wanted to just deep dive into that and understand what was the world like then and what came out of this period of time. So I'm curious to see what we learn today, see what else there might have been that I may not have known before. So we'll get started. I am currently battling a bit of a cold, I think, or the tickling of a cold. So I've got myself a nice cup of tea. Might recommend that you grab your own nice warm bev and come along for a ride if you're interested. All right. So without further ado, here we go. All right, gonna take a brief sip of tea to soothe my throat before we start reading. Are you hydrated today? Have you had enough water or whatever your beverage of choice is that is hydrating? Okay. A Year Without a Summer. The year 1816 was known as A Year Without a Summer because of severe climate abnormalities that caused average global temperatures to decrease by 0.4 to 0.7 degrees Celsius, or 0.7 to 1 degree Fahrenheit, which is pretty significant. Summer temperatures in Europe that year were the coldest of any on record between 1766 and 2000, resulting in crop failures and major food shortages across the Northern Hemisphere. Evidence suggests that the anomaly was predominantly a volcanic winter event caused by the massive 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora. And I think I'm interested in learning more about this, so we'll look into that a little bit more later. But this was predominantly caused by the eruption of Mount Tambora in April in modern-day Indonesia, commonly referred to as the Dutch East Indies at the time. This eruption was the largest in at least 1,300 years after the hypothesized eruption causing the volcanic winter of 536. Interesting. I was not familiar with that. We can look into that a little bit more later too. Its effect on the climate may have been exacerbated by the 1814 eruption of Mayon in the Philippines. A significant amount of volcanic ash and gases released into the atmosphere block sunlight, leading to global cooling. Countries such as the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland and Bourbon Restoration France, which is interesting. I don't think I'm as familiar with that. There's a lot of history here that I actually don't know very much about. So the Bourbon Restoration was a period of French history during which the House of Bourbon returned to power after the fall of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1814 and 1815. Exiled supporters of the monarchy returned to France, which had been profoundly changed by the French Revolution. France experienced significant hardship, with food riots and famine becoming common. The situation was exacerbated by the fact that Europe was still recovering from the Napoleonic Wars, which I am somewhat familiar with, but let's jog our memories. The Napoleonic Wars, which lasted from 1803 to 1815, were a global series of conflicts fought by a fluctuating array of European coalitions against the French First Republic, 1803 to 1804, under the First Consul, followed by the First French Empire, under the Emperor of the French. All right. So this added to the socioeconomic stress felt in Europe, but it seems like France in particular. North America also faced extreme weather conditions. In the eastern US, a persistent, quote, dry fog dimmed the sunlight, causing unusual cold and frost throughout the summer months. Crops failed in regions like New England, leading to food shortages and economic distress. These conditions forced many families to leave their homes in search of better farming opportunities, contributing to westward expansion. So that's really interesting. Also, I need a sip of tea. Gotta soothe the throat. This year of no summer, or this persistent fog, made people head west basically to see if they could just grow better crop. But it had significant impact on farming in this time. A larger description: the year without a summer was an agricultural disaster. Historian John D. Post called it, quote, the last great subsistence crisis in the Western world. The climatic aberrations of 1816 had their greatest effect on New England in the US, Atlantic Canada, and Western Europe, which is interesting because of the fact that this volcano erupted in basically Indonesia, that the areas that were most affected by this ash cloud were kind of on the other side of the world. The main cause of the year without a summer is generally held to be a volcanic winter created by the April 15 eruption of Mount Tambora in Sumbawa. The eruption had a volcanic explosivity index, VEI, ranking of 7 and ejected at least 37 kilometers cubed of dense rock equivalent material into the atmosphere. It remains the most recent confirmed VEI 7 eruption to date. Other volcanic eruptions of at least VEI 4 around this time include the 1808 mystery eruption in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, which was one or potentially multiple unidentified volcanic eruptions that resulted in a significant rise in stratospheric sulfur aerosols. I can't read. Once again, can't read. It says aerosols. And a significant rise in stratospheric sulfur aerosols, leading to a period of global cooling analogous to the year without a summer in 1806. So, wow, in like 8 years, this happened pretty quickly. In 1812, La Soufriere en St. Vincent in the Caribbean. In 1812 again, the Awu in the Dutch East Indies. 1813, I can't pronounce things. The Nansei Islands or the Ryukyu Arc are a chain of Japanese islands, okay, that stretch southwest from Kyushu to Taiwan, I think. Suwanosejima, okay. And in 1814, Mayon in the Philippines. So that's pretty significant in a couple of years because we had one of the biggest volcanic eruptions basically in recorded history in the 1800s. And then we had pretty massive eruptions as well in very close succession in this time. So that is fascinating. Although I guess it's not surprising that this mystery eruption could have set off this chain, right, of reactions globally. I don't really know that much about how this works, but I'm guessing that this happened in close succession is not actually that coincidental. I am curious about the volcanic explosivity index and what some of the most powerful volcanoes have been. So the VEI is a scale used to measure the size of explosive volcanic eruptions. It was devised by Christopher G. Newhall of the United States Geological Survey and Stephen Self in 1982. Quick tea break. One more sip. So this is all a lot of pretty technical stuff here if you want to pause and read that section, but I am curious. The indice goes from 0 to 8. The VEI associated with an eruption is dependent on how much volcanic material is thrown out, to what height, and how long the eruption lasts. The scale is logarithmic from VEI 2 and up. An increase of 1 index indicates an eruption that is 10 times as powerful. As such, there's a discontinuity in the definition of the VEI between indices 1 and 2. The lower border of the volume of ejecta jumps by a factor of 100 from 10,000 to 1 million meters cubed, while the factor is 10 between all higher indices. I think I've learned I don't like the word ejecta. That's a weird word. So we do have these terms like VEI. We have effusive. A VEI of 1 is gentle. A VEI of 2 becomes explosive. A VEI of 3 is severe. A VEI of 4 is catastrophic. So trying to see, it looks like there are some significant volcanoes that have erupted in history that hit these VEIs. So a VEI that was gentle has been the Dieng volcanic complex in Indonesia, the Havre Seamount in New Zealand. VEI of 2 looks like Mount Etna, which is in Italy. And I do believe Mount Etna is still pretty active. I think we've seen eruptions in our lifetime there. Let's see, Mount Etna. Yeah, Mount Etna is one of the world's most active volcanoes and is in an almost constant state of activity. The fertile volcanic soils produced from this activity support extensive agriculture with vineyards and orchards spread across the lower slopes of the mountain and the broad plain of Catania to the south. Mount Etna has been designated a decade volcano Decade volcanoes are 16 volcanoes identified by the International Association of Volcanology or volcanology and chemistry of the Earth's interior, or the IAVCEI. That's a mouthful. As being worthy of particular study in light of their history of large destructive eruptions and proximity to densely populated areas. The Decade Volcanoes project encourages studies and public awareness activities at these volcanoes with the aim of achieving a better understanding of volcanoes and the dangers they present, and thus being able to reduce the severity of natural disasters. So the 16 volcanoes are, one is in Russia, Avachinsky Koryatsky in Kamchatka, Russia. Population at risk of lava flow is nearly 180,000 people. Last known eruption was in 2008. Interesting. Whoa, okay. So Galeras in Colombia is an Andean stratovolcano in Nariño, and there's about 1.6 million people in the area of the estimated lava flow. Mauna Loa, Hawaii, question mark. How many people are at risk? It says the largest of the active shield volcanoes in the Hawaiian Islands, lower flanks populated in multiple directions, but most dangerous to the city of Hilo. Mount Etna is 1.1 million people are at risk of the airflow. It's capable of lava bombs and violent VEI-3 eruptions. The whole metro city of Catania, in general, due to air pollution and ash clouds, would be affected. In Indonesia, you have about 5 million people at risk of the lava flow of Mount Merapi. Mount Merapi is an active stratovolcano located on the border between the province of Central Java and the special region of Yogyakarta, Indonesia. The DRC has Mount Nyiragongo, I believe. Nyiragongo. That would affect nearly 2 million people. There's no census for decades in sprawling city of Goma. Lava known to be highly fluid and fast-moving. May 2021 eruption killed 32 people and injured thousands. Currently not monitored for seismic activity. In the U.S., I think, Mount Rainier is the only one. Okay, Mauna Loa is in Hawaii, but on the continent of North America, Mount Rainier is one of these decades volcanoes that's being monitored. Mount Rainier seems to be estimated, as of 2010, is estimated to affect about 800,000 people, the whole of Pierce County, and potentially as far as Seattle. Mount Rainier is one of the most glaciated stratovolcanoes in the Cascade Volcanic Arc, capable of setting off massive lahars, as evidenced in the valleys below it in all directions. Known to have been both landslide type lahars and or snowmelt lahars, considered by USGS to be one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the USA. Mount Rainier, one of our nation's most dangerous volcanoes. Interesting. Mount Rainier, living safely with a volcano in your backyard. Each year, almost 2 million visitors come to Mount Rainier National Park to admire the volcano and its glaciers, alpine meadows, and forested ridges. The USGS research shows that Mount Rainier is one of our nation's most dangerous volcanoes. It has been the source of countless eruptions and volcanic mudflows, lahars, I believe, that have surged down valleys on its flanks and buried broad areas now densely populated. To help people live more safely with the volcano, the USGS scientists are working closely with local communities, emergency managers, and the National Park Service. Lahars look and behave like flowing concrete, and they destroy or bury most man-made structures in their paths. I'm curious.
Lahars, a volcanic hazard. Volcanoes can be dangerous even after an eruption has ended. An eruption can cover the sides of volcanoes with loose rocks and ash. When it rains heavily, rock, ash, and debris are easily swept into water, forming lahars. These flows can move with great destructive force, moving anything and everything in their path. They can flow much faster than someone can run. Lahars can occur anytime during an eruption, but they can also occur for many months and years after an eruption has ended. Lahars, also called mudflows, are fast-moving mixtures of water, hot rocks, ash, and debris such as tree stumps originating from a volcano. The material they leave behind can also be dangerous to walk on or cause damage to vehicles.
All right, well, thank you to the UWI Seismic Research Center for that explanation of lahars. Still can't say the word. Wow. Okay. Well, that's terrifying. So that's good. On that note, I'm going to take a quick tea break. Again, I need a refill on my tea because it is helping my throat. I need it to keep reading. So, quick tea break, and we'll be back. I'm back with my piping hot, very full cup of tea. Does anyone else just like fill their tea to the absolute brim? Here's my elderberry lemon tea. I call it my immunity. All right. I also realized during my little tea break how far off topic I was getting. I got way into the volcanoes. And to be fair, volcanoes, very cool. However, not the point of what I meant to look up, which was the year without a summer. And I was most interested in the Mount Tambora eruption of 1815, which caused it. So, backtracking a bit, maybe another day I'm going to do a deeper dive into volcanoes because, yeah, they're super interesting, deeply terrifying, and they live among us. But I wanted to go back to Mount Tambora because we did learn that Mount Tambora was a VEI of 7 when it erupted in 1815. So basically, on the VEI or volcanic explosivity index, it goes up to 8. Tambora was a 7. And it looks like that is considered a super colossal volcanic eruption. And the only times we have had volcanoes erupt that have been 7s were, I don't even know what this means, 37 KYR. So this must have happened basically before the human era. This happened about 39,000 years ago. It was the Campanian Ignimbrite eruption or the CI eruption. So this was a VEI 7 eruption. Then we had the Kikai caldera off the coast of Japan in 4300 BC. Santorini, we had a VEI 7 eruption in 1600 BC. Taupo, 232 AD in New Zealand. Somalis in, where's this? Also Indonesia in 1257. And then Tambora was the last VEI 7 in 1815. And then VEI 8s are mega colossal volcanoes. Sorry, I know I'm still a little off topic of the year without a summer, but this to me is like very fascinating and deeply terrifying. So the last time we've had VEI 8 mega colossal eruptions were far before human era. So we had it 30,000 years ago, 26,000 years ago, about 2,000 years ago. Is this 630,000 years ago? So Yellowstone erupted about 2.1 million years ago. Is that right? Yeah. The Plinian eruption happened 2.1 million years ago. I know Yellowstone is considered, a mega volcano. I don't know if there's any chance of it erupting in the near future, but maybe that's another thing to research another time, because clearly we can go into some rabbit holes with volcanoes for sure. Volcanoes, fascinating. But that's not mainly what we're here to talk about. We are specifically here for the eruption of Mount Tambora, which happened in April 1815. Mount Tambora, a volcano on the island of Sumbawa in present-day Indonesia, which was then part of the Dutch East Indies, erupted in what is now considered the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded human history. This eruption with a volcanic explosivity index of 7, which is the second highest it can be, or I believe super colossal, if my memory serves me, which was the most recent confirmed VEI 7 eruption. Although Mount Tambora eruption reached a violent climax on April 10th, 1815, increased steaming and small phreatic eruptions occurred during the next 6 months to 3 years. Whoa. The ash from the eruption column dispersed around the world and lowered global temperatures in an event sometimes known as the year without a summer. In 1816. This brief period of significant climate change triggered extreme weather and harvest failures in many areas around the world. Several climate forcings coincided and interacted in a systemic manner that has not been observed after any other large volcanic eruption since the early Stone Age. This goes more into the eruption itself, but we come full circle finally to a year without a summer. So here we are. We talked a little bit about the early description, the eruptions in the early 1800s, not just Mount Tambora, although Mount Tambora was the biggest. It looks like these other eruptions in the early 1800s built up a substantial amount of atmospheric dust. And so temperatures fell worldwide as the airborne material blocked sunlight in the stratosphere. According to a 2012 analysis by Berkeley Earth, the 1815 Tambora eruption caused a temporary drop in the Earth's average land temperature of about 1 degree Celsius. Smaller temperature drops were recorded from 1812 to 1814 eruptions. The Earth had already been in a centuries-long period of cooling that began in the 14th century, known today as the Little Ice Age, and it had already caused considerable agricultural distress in Europe. I am curious as well, this is maybe another future topic I want to dive into, is going to be the Little Ice Age. This is a really interesting period of history that spanned like a very long time that I do want to look into a little bit more one day. But we're not there right now. I'm not going down that rabbit hole just yet. So the Little Ice Age had already caused considerable agricultural distress in Europe, and the eruption of Tambora occurred near the end of the Little Ice Age, exacerbating the background global cooling of the period. This period also occurred during the Dalton Minimum, a period of relatively low solar activity from 1790 to 1830. May 1816 had the lowest Wolf number. A Wolf number is a quantity that measures the number of sunspots and groups of sunspots present on the surface of the sun. Historically, it was only possible to detect sunspots on the far side of the sun indirectly using helioseismology. So May 1816 had the lowest Wolf number to date since records on solar activity began. It is not yet known, however, if and how changes in solar activity affect the Earth's climate, and this correlation does not prove that lower solar activity produces global cooling. So how did Mount Tambora affect different regions of the planet? So in Africa, there's no direct evidence for conditions in the Sahel region have been found, though conditions from surrounding areas have implied above normal rainfall. Below the Sahel, the coastal regions of West Africa likely experienced below normal levels of precipitation. Severe storms affected the South African coast during the Southern Hemisphere winter. On July 29th to the 30th, 1816, a violent storm occurred near Cape Town, South Africa, which brought forceful northerly winds and hail and caused severe damage to shipping. Ships and logbooks from The Year Without Summer is the source for that. In Asia, the monsoon season in China was disrupted, resulting in overwhelming floods in the Yangtze Valley. Summer snowfall or otherwise mixed precipitation was reported in various regions. In Taiwan, snow was reported and frost was reported. A large-scale famine in Yunnan helped reverse the fortunes of the ruling Qing dynasty. In India, the delayed summer monsoon caused late torrential rains that aggravated the spread of cholera from a region near the Ganges in Bengal to as far as Moscow. In Bengal, abnormal cold and snow was reported in the winter monsoon. In Japan, quick tea break. In Japan, which was still cautious after the cold weather-related Great Tenmai famine of 1782 to 1788, they had a famine for 6 years. The Great Tenmai famine affected Japan during the Edo period. The famine was the deadliest one among the early modern period of Japan. Okay, another thing to look into one day, because that's significant. A famine period for that long is wow. So in Japan, they were still cautious about cold weather-related famine. Cold damaged crops, but no crop failures were reported, and there was no adverse effect on the population. Interesting. In Europe, which seems to be one of the hardest hit regions based on the up top description, but we'll see. Sounds like my heat's about to kick on, so if you hear a sound, that's my heat going. All right. In Europe, as a result of the series of volcanic eruptions in the 1810s, crops had been poor for several years. The final blow came in 1815 with the eruption of Tambora. Europe, still recuperating from the Napoleonic Wars, suffered from widespread food shortages, resulting in its worst famine of the century. Low temperatures and heavy rains resulted in failed harvests in Great Britain and Ireland. Famine was prevalent in North and Southwest Ireland following the failure of wheat, oat, and potato harvests. Food prices rose sharply throughout Europe. With the cause of the problems unknown, hungry people demonstrated in front of grain markets and bakeries. Food riots took place in many European cities. Though riots were common during times of hungers, the food riots of 1816 and 1817 were the most violent period on the continent since the French Revolution. Wow. So that was sourced from Henry Stammel's 1983 Volcano Weather, the story of 1816. Between 1816 and 1819, major typhus epidemics occurred in parts of Europe, including Ireland, Italy, Switzerland, and Scotland, precipitated by the famine. More than 65,000 people died as the disease spread out of Ireland. The long-running Central England temperature record reported the 11th coldest year on record since 1659, as well as the third coldest summer and the coldest July on record. Widespread flooding of Europe's major rivers is attributed to the event, as is frost in August. Wow. Hungary experienced snowfall colored brown by volcanic ash. In northern Italy, red snow fell throughout the year. Red snow? I'm sorry. Hungary had brown snowfall. Sure. Yeah. Weird. But then northern Italy had red snow falling throughout the year? Wow. Flooding impeded navigation of major rivers like the Rhine, including the transportation of grain. In German-speaking lands, particularly inland, prices rose, and only Württemberg saw deaths exceed births. Emigration caused a greater population loss than excess mortality. Austria avoided famine. Wow, way to go, Austria, I guess. How? In Switzerland, famine was limited to the east, which was densely populated and more industrialized. In western Switzerland, the summers of 1816 and 1817 were so cold that an ice dam formed below a tongue in the Gaitro Glacier in the Val de Bagnères, creating a lake. Despite engineer Ignace Benet's efforts to drain the growing lake, the ice dam collapsed catastrophically in June 1818, killing 40 people in the resulting flood. Harvests were not affected everywhere. In Scandinavia and the northern Baltic regions were almost normal, as they were in Eastern Europe and Western Russia. Indeed, the Russian Emperor Alexander I was able to donate grain to Western Europe. Way to go. Thanks, Alexander I, even though this didn't affect me at all. North America. In the spring and summer of 1816, a persistent dry fog was observed in parts of the eastern United States. The fog reddened and dimmed sunlight such that sunspots were visible to the naked eye. Neither wind nor rainfall dispersed the fog. Retrospectively characterized by Clive Oppenheimer as stratospheric sulfate aerosol veil. The weather was not itself a hardship for those accustomed to long winters. Hardship came from the weather's effects on crops and thus on the supply of food and firewood. The consequences were felt most strongly at higher elevations, where farming was already difficult even in good years. In May 1816, frost killed off most crops in the higher elevations of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and upstate New York. On June 6th, snow fell in Albany and Dennisville, Maine. On June 6th, wow. In Cape May, New Jersey, frost was reported 5 nights in a row in late June, causing extensive crop damage. Though fruit and vegetable crops survived New England, corn was reported to have ripened so poorly that no more than a quarter of it was usable for food, and so much of it was moldy and not even fit for animal feed. The crop failures in New England, Canada, and parts of Europe caused food prices to rise sharply. In Canada, Quebec ran out of bread and milk, and Nova Scotians found themselves boiling foraged herbs for sustenance. Sarah Snell Bryant on Cummington, Massachusetts. Wild name. Cummington, Massachusetts. Oh no. Okay. Great. Wow. We don't talk enough about Cummington, Massachusetts. Okay. Sarah Snell Bryant of Cummington, Massachusetts wrote in her diary, weather backward. That's it. That's the whole thing. She just wrote weather backward, and that's significant. But she was from Cummington, Massachusetts. I'm so sorry. Okay. At the church family of Shakers near New Lebanon, New York, Nicholas Bennett wrote on May 1816 that all was froze and the hills were barren like winter. Temperatures fell below freezing almost every day in May. The ground froze on June 9th. On June 12th, the Shakers had to replant crops destroyed by the cold. On July 7th, it was so cold that all of their crops had stopped growing. Salem, Massachusetts physician Edward Holyoake, a weather observer and amateur astronomer, while in Franconia, New Hampshire, wrote on June 7th, exceedingly cold, ground frozen hard, and squalls of snow through the day. Icicles 12 inches long on the shade of noonday. After a lull, by August 17th, Holyoake noted an abrupt change from summer to winter by August 21st. When meager bean and corn crop were killed. The fields, he wrote, were as empty and as white as October. The Berkshire saw frost again on August 23rd, as did much of New England and upstate New York. Whoa. Massachusetts historian William G. Atkins summed up the disaster. Severe frost occurred every month. June 7th and 8th, snow fell, and it was so cold that crops were cut down, even freezing the roots. Breadstuffs were scarce and prices high, and the poorer class of people were often in straits and want of food. It must be remembered that the granaries of the Great West had not then been opened to us by railroad communication, and people were obliged to rely upon their own resources or upon others in their immediate locality. Rapid dramatic temperature swings were common, with temperatures sometimes reverting from normal or above normal summer temperatures as high as 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 degrees Celsius, to near freezing within hours. Sometimes I complain about some of the weather volatility that we experience here in the Midwest, but whoa, 95 to like near freezing is crazy, especially in July and August. Thomas Jefferson was alive then. By then retired from politics to his estate at Monticello in Virginia, sustained crop failures that sent him further into debt. On September 13th, a Virginia newspaper reported that corn crops would be 1/2 to 2/3 short and lamented that, quote, the cold as well as the drought has nipped the buds of hope. A Norfolk, I don't know how to say this. Norfolk. Is that better? Norfolk, Virginia newspaper reported. It is now the middle of July, and we have not yet had what would probably be called summer. Easterly winds have prevailed for nearly 3 months past. The sun during that time has generally been obscured and the sky overcast with clouds. Crop failures were aggravated by inadequate transportation infrastructure with few roads or navigable inland waterways and no railroads. It was prohibitively expensive to import food in most of the country. Maryland experienced brown, bluish, and yellow snowfall in April and May, colored by volcanic ash in the atmosphere. Whoa. South America. A newspaper account of northeastern Brazil was published in the United Kingdom. By an arrival at Liverpool, we received amounts of the Pernambuco of the 8th of Feb, 1817, which state that a most uncommon drought has been experienced in the tropical regions of the Brazils, or that part of the country between Pernambuco and Rio de Janeiro. By this circumstance, all streams have dried up. The cattle were dying or dead, and the population emigrating to the borders of the great rivers in search of water. The greatest distress prevailed. Provisions were wanting, and the mills completely at a stand. They have no windmills, so that no corn could be ground. Vessels have been sent from the Pernambuco to the United States to fetch flour, and what tended to increase this distress was the interruption of the coasting trade through the dread war with Buenos Aires. So, okay. No accounts in Antarctica, though. What's up with that? Kidding. So, this is what I'm pretty interested in. Do they talk about it? Yes. Societal effects. So we know that there was a lot of crop failure, a lot of death and disease and just devastation across the world, but people were living through it. And how did people handle that? And how did it affect our art and literature that still stands today? So I am curious about what has come out of this period of time, and what we might have lost sight of was very much inspired by this era of history. The societal effects. High levels of tephra. Tephra is a fragmental material produced by a volcanic eruption. High levels of tephra in the atmosphere caused a haze to hang over the sky for several years after the eruption and created rich red hues in sunsets. Paintings during the years before and after seem to confirm that these striking reds were not present before Mount Tambora's eruption and depict moodier, darker scenes, even in the light of both of the sun and the moon. Caspar David Friedrich's The Monk by the Sea from 1808 to 1810, and Two Men by the Sea indicate the shift of mood. So I believe this is from prior to the eruption, and that was 1808 to 1810, and then this is Two Men by the Sea in 1817. So that's really interesting. What else do we have? In a 2007 study analyzing paintings created between the years of 1500 and 1900, around the times of notable volcanic events, found a correlation between volcanic activity and the amount of red used in the painting. High levels of tephra in the atmosphere led to spectacular sunsets during this period, as depicted in the paintings of J.M.W. Turner. So they have an example of that here by J.M.W. Turner. And this was from 1828. So I guess the long-standing effects in the atmosphere still persisted, even though the year without summer seemed to mainly be 1816, that we still had the effects of this tephra in the atmosphere for a long time. So the paintings of J.M.W. Turner, which we just showed, may have given rise to the yellow tinge predominant in his paintings, such as the Chichester Canal. I feel like the British don't pronounce it that way. What's it going to be? Chichester? I don't know. I don't think it's Chichester, is it? I don't know. The similar phenomena were observed after the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa and on the west coast of the United States during the 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo from Alaska. The lack of oats to feed horses might have inspired the German inventor Karl Drais to research new ways of horseless transportation, which led to the invention of the Draisine, and the velocipede, a precursor of the bicycle. So we didn't have bikes? Wait, when was the bicycle invented? So vehicles that have two wheels and requiring balancing by the rider date back to the early 19th century. The first means of transport making use of two wheels arranged tandemly, and thus the archetype of the bicycle. The German Dreisine dating back to 1817. The term bicycle was coined in France in the 1860s, and the descriptive title, penny farthing, used to describe an ordinary bicycle as a 19th century term. Okay. But it seems like early bicycles. Wow. The first verifiable claim for a practically used bicycle belongs to German Baron Karl von Drais Sauerbrunn, a civil servant to the Grand Duke of Baden in Germany. Drais invented his Laufmaschine, German for running machine, in 1817, which was called the Dreisine, or the Dreisine in French, by the press. He patented, sorry, the Midwest comes out. He patented this design in 1818, which was the first commercially successful two-wheeled steerable human-propelled machine, commonly called a velocipede and nicknamed hobby horse or dandy horse. It was initially manufactured in Germany and France. Hans Erhard Lessing, Drais' biographer, found from circumstantial evidence that Drais' interest in finding an alternative to the horse was the starvation and death of horses caused by crop failure in 1816, the year without a summer, following the volcanic eruption of Tambora. Wow. So this gave us the bicycle. These were early bikes because, unfortunately, horses were dying, but human ingenuity perseveres. I did not know that. That's really interesting to me. I hope that's interesting to other people. Okay, so yeah, Karl Drais invented the bicycle, or one of the first models of a modern bicycle, in 1817 as a response to horses dying because of the crop failure from this time. The crop failures of the year without a summer may have shaped the settlement of the Midwestern United States, as many thousands of people left New England for Western New York and the Northwest Territory in search of a more hospitable climate, richer soil, and better growing conditions. Indiana became a state in December 1816, and Illinois did 2 years later. The British historian Lawrence Goldman has suggested that migration into the Burned Over District comprises western parts of the central New York State. In the early 19th century, religious revivals and the formation of new religious movements of the Second Great Awakening took place to such a great extent that spiritual fervor expanded like a forest fire. So it was responsible for centering the abolitionist movement in that region. Abolitionist movement was the movement to end slavery and liberate enslaved individuals. And that makes sense, actually. The Civil War would have happened a couple decades later. 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, I believe, were in the 1860s. According to historian L.D. Stilwell, Vermont alone experienced a decrease in population between 10,000 and 15,000 in 1816 and 1817, erasing 7 previous years of population growth. Whoa. Among those who left Vermont were the family of Joseph Smith, who moved from Norwich, Vermont to Palmyra, New York. This move precipitated the series of events that culminated to Smith founding the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Okay, no comment on that quite yet, but maybe we'll do a deep dive one day into Mormonism and Joseph Smith, because I do know a little bit about Mr. Smith here, and I have thoughts, but maybe another day. All right, and then the one I think I knew this was like my main fun fact, but I've learned a lot so far that has been interesting to me. I think this is really fascinating. In June 1816, quote, incessant rainfall during the wet, ungenial summer forced Mary Percy Shelley. I don't know how to pronounce that. I want to say Percy Bysshe Shelley. Mary Shelley, Percy Bysshe Shelley, Lord Byron, and Polidori and their friends to stay indoors at Villa Diodati for much of their Swiss holiday. Inspired by a collection of German ghost stories that they had read, Lord Byron proposed a contest to see who could write the scariest story, leading Mary Shelley to write Frankenstein and Lord Byron to write, quote, a fragment, which Polidori later used as inspiration for the vampire, which was a precursor to Dracula. Those days inside Villa Diodati, remembered fondly by Mary Shelley, were accompanied by wine and laudanum use, a tincture of opium, and intellectual conversations. So laudanum was a type of opium containing approximately 10% powdered opium by weight. Cool. So it was the eruption of Mount Tambora and laudanum that has given us Frankenstein and Dracula. Isn't that fun? After listening intently to one of these conversations, she awoke with the image of Victor Frankenstein kneeling over his monstrous creation, and thus was inspired to write Frankenstein. Lord Byron was inspired to write the poem Darkness by a single day when the fowls all went to roost at noon and the candles had to be lit as at midnight. The imagery in the poem is starkly similar to the conditions of The Year Without a Summer. Am I going to read this poem? Okay. I had a dream, which was not all a dream. The bright sun was extinguished, and the stars did wander darkling in the eternal space, rayless and pathless, and the icy earth swung blind and blackening in the moonless air. Morn came and brought no day. And then just a little line here. Justus von Liebig, a chemist who had experienced the famine as a child in Darmstadt, later studied plant nutrition and introduced mineral fertilizers. Cool. Comparable events, which I feel like could be a huge rabbit hole, so maybe I table that for another day. And then we also have these that I'm also interested in: the mystery eruption of 1458, the Dalton minimum, global cooling, the Little Ice Age in particular. I think I want to do a deep dive into in the future. And then Tambora culture, interesting, lost village and culture in Sumbawa Island, Indonesia, because I guess they're kind of like Pompeii. They were a lost city and culture that was buried by volcanic ash and pyroclastic flows from the massive eruption of Tambora. I believe it said in the volcanic explosive index, if we still have it, Pompeii, or it was Vesuvius, right? Vesuvius, where does Vesuvius rank on here? Vesuvius was a 5. Vesuvius was a cataclysmic volcano, and it buried Pompeii. So, yeah, Tambora was completely buried by this volcano. Wow. Where were we? Yeah, I just wanted to go back because I was kind of curious a little bit more about this group of friends going and writing the precursors to Frankenstein and Dracula. So the Villa Diodati is a mansion in the village of Colony near Lake Geneva in Switzerland. It's notable because Lord Byron rented it and stayed there with Polidori in the summer of 1816. Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, and Mary's stepsister Claire Claremont. That sounds like a fake name. Claire Claremont had rented a house nearby, and they were frequent visitors. Because of the poor weather in June 1816, the group famously spent 3 days together inside the house creating stories to tell each other, 2 of which were developed in the landmark works of the Gothic horror genre Frankenstein by Mary Shelley and The Vampire, which was the first modern vampire story by Polidori. So in the summer of 1816, Lord Byron rented the villa from June 10th to November 1st. Whoa. The scandal of the separation from his wife, rumors of an affair with his half-sister, and ever-increasing debt had forced him to leave England and never return. In April of that year, whoa, Lord Byron. Lord Byron's messy. Maybe we'll have to do a deep dive in Lord Byron one of these days. Do I know a lot about Lord Byron? I know he was like a poet, but he's a messy Percy Bysshe Shelley. Summer of 1816, he had a scandal from his wife. Rumors of an affair with his half-sister dog. Whoa. No. Ever-increasing debt had forced him to leave England, never to return. April of that year. Tough, but feels like you made choices, Lord Byron. Poets are messy. Don't date poets, guys. That's... Okay. Byron arrived at Lake Geneva in May, where he met and befriended poet Percy Shelley, I'm not saying this man's middle name, who was traveling with his future wife, Mary Godwin, now better known as Mary Shelley. Byron settled at the Villa Diodati with his personal physician, John William Polidori. Oh, Polidori was a doctor. Okay. Shelley rented a smaller house called the Maison Chapuis on the waterfront nearby. The group was also joined by Mary's stepsister, Claire Clairmont, made-up name, with whom Byron had an affair in London. Byron is messy. Claire Clairmont, stepsister of Mary Shelley, mother of Lord Byron's daughter Allegra. And did she have a little messy relationship with her? Oh no. Whoa, they're all messy. Oh my God. So Villa Diodati was essentially just like a drug den in 1816. They were all getting high on laudanum, sharing ghost stories, and impregnating each other. Oh no. Okay. That's messy. And I'm intrigued, and I'm gonna look into that a little bit more one day for sure. We're back to the weather that inspired it all. The weather was unseasonably cold and stormy, perfect for taking opium and having affairs with your wife's sister. The weather was unseasonably cold and stormy, and Mary Shelley later described the incessant rain of that wet, ungenial summer. When the rain kept them indoors at the Villa Diodati over 3 days in June, the five turned to reading fantastical stories, including Phantasmagoriana. I think that's it. Phantasmagoriana is a French anthology of German ghost stories. And then they devised their own tales. Mary Shelley wrote the first draft of what would become Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. She was just 18 years old at the time. And Polidori was inspired by a fragmentary story of Byron's, fragment of a novel, to produce The Vampire, a progenitor of the romantic vampire genre. Byron's story fragment was published as a postscript to Mazeppa, and he also wrote the third canto of the Schild Herald. I don't know what these words are. Mazeppa is a narrative poem written by English romantic poet Lord Byron in 1819. It is based on a popular legend about the early life of Ivan Mazeppa, who later became the hetman of Ukraine. So many words I've never heard. Hetman. Child Harold's Pilgrimage. A romance. What? Lord Byron. I feel like I'm going to learn more about Lord Byron and be like, I don't like him. What are you saying? Child Harold's Pilgrimage. A romance. Dedicated to length, it describes the travels and reflections of a young man disillusioned with a life of pleasure and revelry. Yeah, stop having affairs with people, man. Of course. Lord Byron, he's a messy person. Whew, so messy. I'm thrilled. This is thrilling. So I feel like I've learned a lot. Year Without a Summer. So we're going to call it here. We've learned a lot today, I think. I think this was fascinating. I've learned I love volcanoes, I think, but I'm also deeply scared of them. But if we get taken out by a volcano, so be it. The earth is majestic and more powerful than us all. Right? Bicycles. Who knew? I didn't realize 1817, the bicycle was created because horses were dying. So that's sad. But now we do have the bicycle. And whoa. I'm going to have to look way more into the messy lives of these absolute freaks who we know and love. The Shelleys, Lord Byron, Polidori was a doctor. Didn't know that. So, okay. I'm thrilled. I learned so much today. I hope you did too. And if you enjoyed this, feel free. Please subscribe and like and comment what was the most intriguing thing you learned, or maybe something I missed about this era of human history and world history. I don't know. Is there more we didn't get to cover? That could be a deep dive for another time. I'm amped right now. I hope you enjoyed the tea that we learned about Lord Byron. Whoa. And if you liked it, give it a like. Share it with your friends. If you hated it, share it with your enemies. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Whoa. I do this thing where I'm just like, when I read things, I can't believe it. Lord Byron, you had an affair with who? Percy Shelley, no. Claire Claremont, made up name. Let's see if I can move this over. Um, hmm. Well, that's not helpful, is it? Okay. Weird. Why did it show me? Oh, no. Okay. Decade volcanoes. Okay. It looks like I can't seem to actually click into this because it just gives me a world map. So we're going to try to zoom in if it lets me and move this over. I've apparently never used technology in my entire life. Why is this happening?